Hello, Internet. I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this is Unpopular Culture. And today we're here to talk about episodes 10 and 11 of Netflix's Daredevil.
And it's pretty good. We have a lot to go through in just 2 episodes. Usually we do 3, but we're going to do this in 2. And then the last one we're going to do 2 more because there's just so much content in the last 4 episodes. So the first episode we get into is called Nelson V Murdock. It's a lawyer joke. But if you don't remember last episode, Murdock, Matt, got kicked the shit out of by both Nobu the ninja right before he got set on fire, and also Fisk. And then he kind of falls back into his home, and the night nurse has to take care of him, and that's kind of off screen. And then he wakes up all beat up, and Foggy is in the room with him.
Yeah, that's pretty much the crux of this episode. It's mostly a Matt Foggy episode, which is good because we've seen Foggy throughout the season, but this is really his time to shine because we really see their friendship highlighted.
Because you can tell they have a really, really good relationship throughout it, and they kind of mention their old friendships, and you have a couple flashbacks before, but this one really hammers it home, especially because we haven't talked about it much since the first 3 episodes, really. Yeah. It's really driving fact the home that this is a really, really big deal for both of them, for Foggy to find out that Matt has been the mask the whole time.
Yeah, and I think they both do a really good job. The performances in this entire series are very good. We've talked about them before. But I think this episode really highlights how good the guy who plays Foggy is able to play this friend character. Not just a friend, like someone that you know, but someone...
Best friend, like confidant.
And he does an excellent job showing his sort of feeling of betrayal, because that's what it is. He's been being lied to about the very nature of his friend, his best friend, for years, and he does a great job of showing that.
And I think it's hard to do scenes like this in almost every form of movie or show, because it either will come across too corny and forced or just not believable, but I think they did a really good job of making it feel impactful to both the characters without kind of overstepping that we don't believe you sort of thing. Like, it felt like he was actually hurt, and he questions the validity of Matt's disabilities, and it comes across very genuine.
It's interesting. One of my favorite parts about this, I don't know if this came to mind with you, but it's a very similar scene to when Matt's trying to explain in, like, episode 2 or 3, when he meets Claire for the first time and he's explaining his powers to her. She seems to take it all in and kind of has a sense of wonderment about it. they're in a life and death situation, but still she's like, wow. And Foggy's just like, what are you talking about? This is bullshit.
It seemed very audience, like real life, kind of how you should react to that.
Yeah, and that was in the back of my mind the whole time. It's a good juxtaposition as to how they handle it differently.
Yeah, I also like the what they'll do throughout this entire episode is they'll jump back and forth between the conversation they're having in real time and the conversations they had when they first met and started hanging out and became friends and all that. And it's a really nice balance of showing the gravity of the situation at hand and also backboning that with, hey, I trusted you, and here's why sort of stuff.
Yeah, the flashbacks are actually really well done. What happens is you get back to law school when they first meet the first day, they're roommates.
And as per usual, and as probably a film rule, you show age and time disparity in facial hair. So Matt is cleanly shaven, and Foggy has a little thing, and he has long hair.
I get that it's. I don't know if they said this was just college. No, it was
college.
It wasn't just law school, but it was college because they were taking classes other than like law school stuff. Yeah. Man, the guy who plays Foggy could not pull off like 15 years younger at all. I excuse it because I like the show overall, and the story is good enough that it was one of those things that you just suspend disbelief. But I mean,
Matt even looked pretty old.
Yeah, but
he's wearing shades the whole time.
I think the guy who plays Matt has a younger face anyway, a little bit. Like I could buy it a little bit, but like Foggy, I was like, that's a late 30s, 40-year-old man in a wig and goatee, but whatever. And of course, as we need to see, it's the early-ish 2000s. They were playing Drops of Jupiter.
Oh yeah, Train, classic.
And that seems pretty good, and I think it sets up the friendship well because you see, unlike other people, Foggy right away treats Matt just like another guy. His disability, if you want to call it that,
isn't like at the forefront.
No, it's a thing about him, but it's not who he is.
I also like that the kind of because this situation when 2 guys in any scene have like a you betrayed me sort of thing, people tend to snicker and go, oh, they're gay, and they make fun of that in the flashback. He says, oh, you're just a really, really good-looking guy. And Matt kind of falters for a second and is like, wait, and then Foggy kind of catches his drift. He's like, oh, no, I mean for girls, like, we're just guys. I'm not into you. But I like that they're, like, poking fun at what you would normally expect out of a shitty audience.
Yeah. So they talk about some of their classes and stuff when we have a good reference and allusion to what's going to happen in the future.
This series has so many like sneaky Easter eggs. It's very impressive. And I didn't catch this. You had to tell me about it.
Yeah, Matt is talking to Foggy, and he talks about how he's taking a Spanish class because a girl he likes, this Greek exchange student or something, is taking it. And if you didn't know the comics, I don't really know the comics, but I found this out.
Right.
He's apparently referencing Elektra because in the comics they met under similar circumstances in college, and then later in the comics she comes back to Hell's Kitchen and they meet again. And
that's crazy interesting.
Yeah.
What a good piece of throwaway writing.
Yeah, and then next season she's coming back. They've already cast her, I guess. So.
And then isn't this also the second time they used the Foggy "Why is he learning that language" joke?
They might have. I don't know. I don't remember. When did they use it otherwise?
I thought it was at the beginning, and he mentioned that he was talking to Karen about it or something. Like, why do you know that?
He was supposed to learn Spanish
million
or something.
People know it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was funny.
So we get some more flashbacks as the thing goes on. We also see them working at the law firm they had been interning at before they left and founded, Nelson and Murdock law firm. And there's a lawsuit going on with the Roxxon Corporation. The Roxxon Corporation has been in all 3 Iron Man movies, at least in the background. Mm-hmm. It's been in Captain America. And I think it may have been in Ant-Man briefly. I don't quite remember. Maybe. But anyway, the point is they're an oil company that is often up to nefarious things in the Marvel Universe.
Is that the same company in the comics that made animals with like lasers on their heads? And
I don't even know. Was that a thing?
Yeah, it's a thing. And then like the animals like fought people. I don't know.
I don't remember.
Maybe that was DC, but it sounds very Marvel-y.
Anyway, so that happens, and then they have a scene where Foggy comes in and says to Matt, "Hey, we've been offered full-time positions. That's great." Matt talks about how he's been reading Thurgood Marshall, and he decides...
Thurgood Marshall, what a great guy.
So then Matt goes on in kind of a diatribe. Not diatribe, it's not bad or anything. It's just he goes on and talks about how he wants to do good for the city. He wants to do good for Hell's Kitchen.
He's taking a moral stance over an economical one, and I think that's kind of the thread of this Daredevil v Fisk thing anyways.
Yes.
So it's kind of just... got roots back in college, and you can see that kind of play its role.
I think this is important, too, because at this point, they're kind of showing solidarity in this mission to make the city a better place via their law firm. But this is juxtaposed by Matt explaining what he's been doing lately, so it shows how they've grown apart. Essentially, they started off with this same mission, and Foggy's still kind of doing the same thing. Yeah. But as time has gone on, and Matt has been disillusioned by the things that are going on in the city, he's wavered, and he started doing these things that are against the law, but are for what he considers his morality.
Right, and I kind of think that Foggy represents pure good, Fisk represents pure evil, and then Matt's kind of in the middle trying to pick which side.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of this wavering gray area that we've been dealing with all season, which I think is a really good narrative to keep, especially there's a conversation he'll have later, I think in the next episode, with a priest about this very same situation.
Yeah. If it were like one of those D&D charts, if you've seen them, I think Daredevil would probably be chaotic good, Foggy would be like lawful good, and like Fisk would probably be chaotic evil because he's fucking crazy. Yeah. So then back in the present day, Matt's trying to explain to Foggy what caused him to stop trying to go about this doing good the lawful way. Mm-hmm. And obviously Matt has these abilities. He can hear things super far away, and he said he could hear things for blocks. And he would sit in his apartment building at night, and he could hear this little girl being molested by her father, which is just fucking awful. And I think that's
such a dark thing that everyone can identify with being bad, like wholly bad. Yeah. And I think that was a really good way to be like, oh no, sometimes the law can't touch these sorts of things.
Yeah, and even Matt tries to say, I tried to do it via the law. I tried to call the cops, but the mother wouldn't say anything because she didn't think the dad would do it. So he just could not stand by and listen to this little girl be molested night after night. So he found this guy in a train yard where he works, and he just beat the shit out of him.
Oh, yeah, and it's pretty brutal, too. Like, blood's dripping from his knuckles. And Charlie Cox, the actor who plays Matt, does a really, really fantastic job of looking both disgusted and aggravated by this character that he's kicking the shit out of at the same time. Because it's not just like Batman beating up. It's very emotion-driven, and I think that was conveyed really well. Like, just a general frustration with the world. And also, like, he probably took it a little too far.
Yeah. I think that's a good scene to compare Daredevil and Batman, because they bear comparing, because they're very similar.
They're pretty much the two sides of the same coin sort of thing.
I think Batman is being motivated by for one, his sort of mental instability because of his parents' deaths,
Yeah.
and he's pushed forward by the sense of justice, and he doesn't take it too far, usually. I'm sure there are some circumstances
I mean, he breaks the shit out of femurs and stuff sometimes, but he's not usually brutal.
It's not
if that makes
not
sense.
emotionally charged.
No, it's like a
him-
means to an end. It's like, I need to get this one out of the fight so I can move on to the next thing and solve the next crime. And it was very personal for Matt.
Yeah. Daredevil is like all emotion. That's the whole deal, is him dealing with the pathos of this whole situation and dealing with his anger against all these people. It's such a huge thread.
Which I find, frankly, more compelling than
It
a
is,
Batman story. And I wish that they had swapped that, sort of.
Yeah.
Because Batman, I think, is cooler in general. But if he had this neat... And they're doing that with the New 52. I think they're exploring that kind of thing a little bit better in the modern comics. But just as in general...
Marvel's better for nuance in characters, generally
I definitely
speaking.
agree.
Because Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, all of them, they're like ideals. They're ideal forms of these heroes.
Yeah.
And Marvel heroes tend to be people who have superpowers trying to do their best. And I think that's the main difference between the two companies. And it comes through very well in TV. If you look at the comparison between Daredevil and Gotham...
Oh, God.
Gotham is terrible.
Oh, no.
So, obviously, Batman isn't really in it. But you have Bruce Wayne, but it's not good. Daredevil tackles this stuff well, and doesn't try and be a prequel, also shoving in tons of villains.
The movies have been doing a pretty good job with that, especially with the Tony Stark PTSD kind of thing.
I guess. They're missing the whole alcoholic thing, though, which is a huge thing in the comics.
I totally...
I get why they're not, because the tone of the movies is generally funny. And...
Also, I think when they started out, Downey Jr. had gone through a bunch of that shit in real life.
Well, yeah, but that's why he was such a good cast.
I think so, too, but I just think like maybe they didn't want the publicity of making the alcoholic do the alcoholic thing.
Maybe.
I don't know, but it's a family show, so it's like I kind of get that they backed off of it.
I guess they touched on it a little in Iron. I know we're going off topic, but still, I think they touched on it a little in Iron Man. At the beginning, he had that drink cart that he took to the desert, and then they dropped it after he became Iron Man.
Yeah, I think that was kind of a nod to the audience.
Sure,
but I still think that because they can do this kind of thing in Daredevil, they are showing like Matt has this weird addiction to kicking the shit out of people.
Yeah.
And I think it's reasonable.
Sure.
I think it's a good way to go about it.
I think what excites me is that we're able to get these kind of shows now with Daredevil and I assume Jessica Jones, which has some very dark themes, if you know anything about that. For instance, the main villain, who's being played by David Tennant, at least in the comics, he did this. I don't know how they're going to do it in the show. He sexually assaults her, and that's one of the reasons Jessica Jones quits being a superhero and becomes a private detective.
Heavy shit.
Yeah.
So hopefully they can maintain a tone like that, and especially if they're doing Punisher.
Sure,
like that's a big deal. You have to be able to touch on death and really bad evil shit.
Sure. So at the end of the episode, we have them sitting in a bar. This is again a flashback. This is like right before they really started to decide to do their law firm, and Foggy draws this little plaque, and it says Nelson and Murdock, attorneys at law. And this is a sign that we had seen in a previous episode that he had actually made up for their office.
And it kind of gives it more gravity, showing that it was kind of like a dream, an ideal that they had going on as friends.
Yeah. And at the end of the episode, Foggy takes all his stuff out of the office, and this is in the present, and he throws the thing in the trash, the plaque. Yeah. And it really shows, again, it seems simple. It seems after you see an episode, of course, it's a visual representation of their friendship, of their dream together. But that's the kind of thing that you don't get in a lot of other shows, or it's shoved down your throat. And I think here it's done very naturally.
Subtle. It was a pretty quick shot. They didn't linger for too long.
Especially because we had seen that plaque in earlier episodes, and they had briefly mentioned, like, oh, it's an inside joke, basically, between us. It shows a natural progression of a story that is being told very deliberately throughout 13 episodes. And I think a lot of shows have a problem of carrying...
They front load it.
Yeah, carrying themes and stories throughout the entire season. A lot of shows don't. They'll pick up plots, places, and drop them, and sometimes the conclusions won't be good. But in this whole season, and I hope this carries through to the other shows, it's just one consistent story. It's essentially, you could sit down and watch it as a one long movie, and it all flows brilliantly.
That's exactly how it should always be shot.
The other things that happen in this episode that aren't part of the main plot, the B plot, is Karen, and she goes to Ben Urich. Ben Urich is talking to his wife, who has some sort of either dementia or Alzheimer's.
It seems like an Alzheimer's sort of thing, where she's forgetting people and she kind of has moments of lucidity.
Yeah.
They also mirror that with Fisk's mother.
Yeah.
In a little bit, which is kind of interesting to see that like, hey, we're dealing with the same shit, but we're on different sides of the fight, sort of thing. But I also really like what they do with Ben and his wife here, because they kind of have this little back and forth where she says, hello, gorgeous, and he says, hey, handsome. And you can tell that's kind of a thing they've always done, and you've never mentioned it before.
Yeah.
And it already feels natural to listen to.
Sure.
It's just a really good way to establish that it's still a very loving relationship, and it makes you care that she's in that situation and care for him that he has to deal with it.
Yeah. He essentially says to her, I'm done with this investigation. It's getting too much. I just can't do it anymore. I'm not spending enough time with you, which I really need to, especially because it's gone unsaid, but especially because of her condition. And she says, you don't have to. It's in your blood. You're a reporter, whatever. So then he goes to tell Karen. And I had some problems with Karen this season. The writing,
she's the
and the
weakest
character.
of all the characters, in my opinion.
But this is a scene that actually kind of makes me not like her as a character, but not in a bad way. It's not to the detriment of the show. It's actually a good thing. It shows that the writing is good enough that they can make a character a little bit shitty and a little bit despicable.
But you don't like him.
Yeah. So Karen says, like, okay, you're not going to do this anymore. Let me show you, like, a nursing home that you're a really good one, I know, that your wife can go to, and you can come visit her there. Lying to him, takes him to a nursing home, and it happens to be where Fisk's mother is being kept because she's still alive.
Right, and if you remember, Fisk's mother has information about, obviously, Fisk and how he murdered his dad, and they did that whole shitty thing, and kind of the holy shit, look at this guy that we're all okay with, he's a monster, pretty much.
And Ben's mad at her at first, and I was too, because that's just a shitty thing to do.
Oh, she exploited the situation out of control, and I think it was a brave decision to make the character pretty much the weak character, not like, I don't mean weak as in writing, I mean she's, as a human being, if she were to exist, is someone that you would describe as weak.
Physically, you mean?
Physically and emotionally.
Sure.
Like, she's the one that always needs help and saving, and it's, I don't know, she just clearly doesn't have her shit together, especially after what happened to her in the first episode, and she's trying to, like, regain that, and she's willing to exploit one of the only people that are willing to work with her. It's very interesting.
So they have a discussion with Fisk's mother, and she tells them about how Fisk killed the father. Mm-hmm. So Ben Urich is like, we gotta get out of here, because he's now just realizing what's going on. So they leave, and that picks up next episode. Yeah. So the only other thing that happens is very important for the next episode, and that is Madame Gao talks briefly with Fisk on a rooftop. They have these conversations occasionally. She's always very good, and as we've mentioned before, she's probably going to show up in some of the other Marvel series because she seems like a character that's potentially going to be an Iron Fist, which tends to deal with the mystical, and she has sort of an air of something about her.
They even make a joke about it in the next episode, something mystical.
Yeah. And she says to Fisk, Vanessa, your girlfriend, she's becoming a distraction, so if you don't deal with that, something bad's going to happen. If you don't make a decision between your business and her, fate is going to decide for you.
Right, and so what happens later on in the episode, and right at the end, Fisk, Vanessa, Owlsley, Wesley, all, that group, they're at a benefit of some sort, and then champagne gets brought out. It turns out the champagne is poisoned, and Vanessa got some of it.
Yeah.
And she starts foaming at the mouth, and shit's going wrong. And Fisk had promised her that the safest place in the city was by his side, and then she gets poisoned right next to him.
Yeah. So that picks up right away in the next episode, Path of the Righteous, and it starts out with an interesting shot. This show is very well shot. We've talked about it, and it's interesting how they choose to frame certain situations. And here it starts out just on a TV with a cartoon playing, and it slowly backs up, and then you see it's an emergency room. Just an emergency room, very calm. And then Fisk and his party, everyone, comes in, and all of a sudden it's very frantic. I like that they shot it this way because it shows that Fisk is bringing this chaos to the situation. It could have just started with them in the emergency room already, but I think the fact that it was very calm, and then they brought it there.
It kind of shows that Fisk has that sort of, that's what happens to him because of his business.
Yes, I agree entirely. And this is a good scene for showing Fisk's vulnerability again. We've seen it before, but definitely here. In part because we have this very fast-paced scene, and stuff's going on. The doctors are saying stuff. You've seen TV shows with doctors. You know how it is. And then it cuts to sort of Fisk and what he's seeing, and everything's going very slow, and he's just focused in on Vanessa. And again, I just talked about how this show's shot, but I have to applaud them for the storytelling and the camera work and how they choose to present the visuals. Yeah. So they take her away, and Fisk's like, "I'm coming with you," in his Fisk voice. And the nurse, this small woman compared to Fisk, it's like, "You can't come in here." He's like, "Don't you know who I am?" And she goes, "It doesn't matter," and walks away.
Yeah, and that's so good because it's the man with like all the power in the city, all of it.
Yeah.
He can do whatever he wants except help.
Yep. And
right now.
In this situation, he can do nothing. He can't even be there with her.
It's so perfect to do that because often what they'll do with villains like this, he'll push his way past and he'll do what he wants. But he's got to fill out paperwork and he's got to take care of the situation and make sure that she can be cared for by professionals, something that he is not qualified to do. And it's really great that they make you care about the villain even a little bit.
Sure.
And even though Vanessa's a crazy bitch that's enabling him to be an evil motherfucker, it's still like, oh man.
I know, right? So it cuts to Karen, and Karen is going to visit Matt. This is the day after Matt has revealed everything to Foggy, and he's still very injured. He's still cut up. He makes an excuse that he was in a car hit him or something.
A Japanese car.
Funny. I was talking to Jake about this earlier. Matt has the best superhero excuse for being injured ever. He's blind. He can just say, "Yeah, I ran into a thing. I fell downstairs." Whatever. Brilliant. Anyway, so Karen tells him all about what she found out about Fisk. And Matt says, "So what? Yeah, he may have killed his dad in self-defense when he was a kid. What are you going to do with that? No one's going to care." And he's right. This is what bugs me about Karen's plan is like, even if they revealed this to the media with no proof other than a senile old woman, and even then there's
even if you had video proof of what happened, like most people are like, yeah. Guy kind of deserved it a little. I mean, he was beating on everyone.
Not to mention he was a minor, and it's been years later, and now he's doing, as far as everyone else is concerned, good for the city.
Yeah.
There's no way this plan would ever work. And Matt says to that effect, he's like, it's not going to do anything. What are you doing? She says that she brings this up to Ben Urich later because he's mad. She goes to talk to him, and he says the same thing. He says, nothing's going to happen with this.
Doesn't she bring up to Foggy, too?
And then she goes to talk to Foggy. Like, she's desperate for someone to latch onto this idea. I think she's wrong. I don't know if that's... The season, as we said, great writing, but this is one time where I don't know if we're supposed to be on her side or not, because I totally disagree with what she's going on about.
I think it might be, because I don't know many people that root for her in this situation. Yeah, when they talk about this, I think maybe they fell victim to a little bit too much subtlety in that respect.
Maybe.
But I think at the same time, every character besides her that we give a shit about is telling her she's wrong, and maybe that should be enough for us to be clued into the fact that you're supposed to think that.
Sure. I guess. I don't know. I just couldn't tell if what the writers were trying to tell us. Which I get, it's a medium, but unlike... It's not like a book where it's sort of subjective.
We don't have an omniscient narrator who's pretty much telling us what to think.
Movies and shows tend to still try and... They're telling a story. It's a narrative. And when you're on a narrative, you generally want to know what side you're on.
Or maybe the point is to not be able to pick a side.
Maybe, but it doesn't... Just the rest of the season wasn't really like that.
Well, I mean, but they have the whole is it good or bad thing.
But still, Matt's the good guy.
I totally understand.
It's just about methods, not really who's right or wrong.
Right, and maybe they're poking at the exposure method, like, is exposing the faults of someone's past have any bearing on their current status?
Sure.
Like, is that something we need to even dredge up?
Maybe.
So, I don't know. I think it was interesting. Even though we know Fisk is bad now, was that a morally wrong thing to do at the time?
True. Fair.
So,
anyway. So, back at the hospital... Wesley is now on damage control because Fisk is just distraught. He's of no good to anyone right now.
No use. Yeah, no. And I really like this episode for Wesley because I think he's one of the more interesting characters, especially on the bad side, air quotes. After that, we cut to Claire patching Matt up again, and you get a pretty good shot of their makeup effects in there. Yeah. She's stitching his abdomen, his ripped, chiseled abdomen.
Yeah.
And
not a lot happens in this scene, and I think is this the last scene Claire is in the show? I think it is.
Yeah, I think it's her departure scene. I think you had to throw that in to make sure that she was the night nurse was going on to the other shows after this point.
The main thing that happens is she tells Matt he needs to find body armor, and she's right, because he gets the shit kicked out of him all the time. Yeah. But as a send-off, I thought it was actually a little anticlimactic. We get a little bit them talking about the relationship that could be, or could have been, but...
That she's never going to do.
I don't know. For some reason, it didn't feel complete, which it shouldn't, because she's going to be in Jessica Jones.
Right, and I don't think they were trying to to give you a complete ending because of that, because she's night nurse. But she also says, like, if you're ever beat up or you need me, that's when I'll be there. But other than that, I'm not going to, which kind of is the night nurse. Like, she's not involved with Daredevil, but she will help.
I guess, but it's just
Doesn't she get with Iron Fist, though?
Oh, I don't know.
I thought she was in a relationship with one of the other heroes.
I know it's not Luke Cage, because Luke Cage and Jessica Jones become a thing, and they get married.
Hot.
So, Jessica Jones is the only person who could take Luke Cage's power dick.
He has a power dick now?
Well, he's Power Man, so...
Fair enough.
Anyway, he must have a power dick. Anyway. But yeah, it felt a little anticlimactic, seeing as though they had built up this relationship, and I assumed they weren't going to end up together because she was going to be on all these other shows, and she had other stuff to have going on. But it just felt a little bit like, maybe we'll pick this up later, maybe not. Like,
maybe they're leaving room for it in the writing to see how it goes with other stuff, to see... You know, I don't think you should ever paint yourself into a corner in writing, if you can help it, especially in something that's going to run multiple seasons.
Yeah.
And also, Rosario Dawson is an excellent actress, so... being able to employ her in later Daredevil episodes and leaving that open is beneficial to you.
Yeah, but she's going to appear in Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, all those, so we will see her reappear this fall on Jessica Jones, I would assume. So then we go back to Fisk yet again, and this cuts back to him all throughout the episode. Wesley is trying to help Fisk out, as he always does, and Fisk is like, stuff's going on, there's pieces in motion, someone's out to get me, we need to move my mother. So Wesley goes, okay, I can do that for you. And Fisk has this really good scene where he goes, Wesley, and he just stops and he goes, thank you. It seemed like he was...
say, like, I love you?
No,
or...
I think he was...
Well, it felt like it was going to be, like, you're my only person.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I think it was going to be some sort of heartfelt, like, hey, you're the only person who's always here for me and I can always trust in you.
Right. And it had a lot of gravity to it by the way he delivered that without having to say all of it.
God, we're basically sucking his dick at this point. We've mentioned it so many times.
Vincent D'Onofrio, you sucked in Jurassic World. I'm not going to suck your dick. This you get a handy for, though.
Sure, fine. So Wesley calls the mom to see how she's doing and be like, hey, we're going to have to move you or whatever. And she tells him, like, oh, yeah, and I saw that lady and her friend came, Karen or whatever. And he's like, what? Yeah. And he hangs up the phone and gets plans in motion.
It's very foreboding. And then Wesley pretty much grabs a gun and drives away without... And he just says, specifically, don't tell Mr. Fisk where I'm going. I have to do this. I don't want him to have to deal with any more shit on his plate, which I totally get. And I think their friendship is kind of a detriment in this respect.
Yeah, and it even more so later in the episode, but we'll get to that. So then Matt has yet another conversation with the priest, and it's just about morality, and it's a lot of the same stuff that was mentioned in the last couple episodes, but this time it was more about, is Matt's rage, if honed and used for good, a good thing, or is it still inherently evil?
Right, like, and they have a discussion about the devil, which is,
of course,
kind of how we're going to move it towards, now we're calling him Daredevil, which is kind of the point. And is the devil not necessarily evil, but is he a catalyst to move people towards righteousness, which is such a good use of the mythos behind that, because that's kind of the point of superheroes in general, right?
Sure.
Like, you're doing a violent, generally despicable act to another human being. You are hurting them, usually physically, to get them to stop doing the bad things. Yeah. But is that inherently good, or is that more gray? And obviously they've been discussing it the entire series, and I just like that you have this, and the priest, by the way, really, really good actor. I really like how he delivers his lines, and he very much gives that, I've been through this a million times, but I'm going to regurgitate this, but I still mean it, sort of thing. I don't know. They picked, again, the casting in this, fantastic. And Matt's reaction is good to it. You can kind of see internally, he's like, well, maybe this is the right thing, but not necessarily the good thing.
Yeah.
So, I like that.
So then Matt goes to beat up, if you remember in the first episode, there was a guy who was in charge of the sex trafficking. They had taken some women and they were going to put them in a shipping crate.
Yeah, he's been back and forth in a couple different episodes.
Fun fact, this guy in the comics is essentially a stilt-themed supervillain.
He's basically a Mega Man villain at that point,
right?
Right?
Yeah. And I don't think they'll ever bring that into the show. There are some things that are even a little too silly for the Marvel Universe movies.
There was a still Easter egg in the...
They did. They had an Easter egg in the guy who makes all the equipment for Fisk and stuff. that you saw like the stilt pants, basically.
Stilt pants.
In the background, but I think that's just an Easter egg. I don't think they'd ever actually use it.
If they do, I hope he gets beat up immediately and then thrown in jail forever.
That'd be funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, he beats him up, and Matt finds out where this guy is.
Because he's still on a quest for body armor, and that's kind of the point. And we saw him in the last episode that we recorded for this, during one of those 3 episodes, and he kind of has a discussion with Fisk. And during the fight with Nobu, you saw Fisk's jacket get ripped open, and you saw that kind of the armor, the flexible armor that he's been talking about.
Sure.
Obviously, the idea here is that's where he's going to get the suit from.
Yeah. So he goes in there, and the guy's name is Melvin Potter. And if you don't know, Melvin Potter in the comics eventually becomes someone called the Gladiator or Gladiator. Pretty sure he's a villain, and there's allusion to that in this because they have a fight, and Melvin Potter starts fighting him with these circular saw blades, and that's a weapon that the Gladiator uses. He also mentions Betsy, who he's doing this for because Fisk said he'd hurt
like a
her.
Sister or something?
No, it's his therapist, and then eventually they get married in the comics.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's kind of unprofessional.
Yes, it sure is. And Matt feels a little bad, I think, for beating him up because after he hits him a little bit, he starts crying, and I think Matt realizes he's a little bit Forrest Gumpy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
he's
like, So he convinces him, hey, I want to stop Fisk. I'll make sure Betsy's not hurt or whatever. Right. I'll just make me a suit and I'll help protect her. But here's the thing. I think what's going to spur him to become Gladiator in the Marvel cinematic.
Betsy's going to get
She's going to get hurt, and he's going to blame Daredevil, and he's going to fight him or whatever.
That'd be fine. I think that's a fine motivation, especially because he's kind of off the handle and very... seems autistic, I think, is the point. Because he seems very focused, like very, very good at... He mentions very, very good at building things.
Yeah.
And like a high-functioning autist. And I think that's a good way to approach that. His character's a little off for me as far as the lines they give him, because the first time you see him, they don't really allude to him not having all his mental faculties.
Right.
And he kind of comes... Because the dude looks like a mobster. Like, he's a big, fit dude, scary. I wouldn't want to meet him in an alley when he was drunk, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he's so vulnerable after this fight, and you're not supposed to be here, and he kind of sobs. I don't know. He's a little off, so I hope that they round that out a little bit better and make the...
Yeah, there was a little bit of a disjoint between the different times we saw him.
Yeah, and maybe that's the point. Maybe he's kind of swapping in between those, but then make those more severe.
I guess.
You know what I'm saying?
Maybe he was playing it up to Matt so he doesn't get beat up.
And I mean, when he gets... Yeah, no shit. When he gets the suit to Matt, he describes it very technically and soundly, and it doesn't sound at all like he's... got any sort of mental issues at all. So it's kind of, I don't know. It's iffy for me.
But then after all that, and we get allusions to the suit, which we don't get till the last episode. Actually, I'm actually glad they didn't do the Daredevil suit until the last episode. It allowed the character to grow outside of like,
I'm a superhero.
Yeah, it allowed him to be a person before he's Daredevil. Anyway. So Karen gets abducted by Wesley because Wesley knows she talked to Fisk's mother about what happened. And sits her down at a table. They're across from each other. He's brandishing a gun.
Yeah, it's a good scene. He has a lot of really good lines, and he kind of talks about... he's always so poetic when he has a monologue, and he kind of talks about how Fisk's mother kind of has moments of lucidity, and it can get blown away by the slightest of breezes. Does he say the word zephyr or something? I don't know. He uses like wispy. He's funny. But they have a good conversation, and then he pulls out a gun basically and is like, "Hey, here's the situation."
Surprisingly, not gonna kill her. He offers her a job. He says, "You're really good at convincing people to go along with things they shouldn't. So come work for us, and you're gonna help convince people that Fisk is a good guy." Which makes sense. It's better than killing her. Also, he says he didn't tell Fisk he was coming here because he's way too busy dealing with Vanessa right now. Now,
that's a good part of their relationship that gets exploited.
Yeah. Now, here's the best part of this episode, probably, in my opinion. It's pretty rad. His phone rings, and the gun is on the table at this point, right in front of him. But his phone rings, and he's distracted for just a second. He looks to his pocket, and he's about to answer it. And Karen, in this moment where he's distracted, grabs the gun and points it at him. Now, this is his downfall, and I think it's really good because it shows the relationship between him and Fisk has consumed his life, and He's obsessed with making sure Fisk is all right and making sure he can do stuff for him, even when he shouldn't be not paying attention. Right. He's got a gun,
and he even talks about like why he's even in the city to begin with. It's not because he hates it; he hates the city, but he's needed by Fisk, and I feel like he likes being needed by the guy.
It's sort of a codependent relationship.
It's very interesting, and the fact that that is exploited and that he's just so focused on helping Fisk at any moment and at the drop of a hat for anything. Yeah. It's kind of an interesting way to finish him off.
Yeah, so Karen now has the gun. He says, "You're not going to shoot me." And she goes, "You think you're the first person I've shot?" And which is interesting.
Has she shot people then?
Alludes to some of her backstory.
Or is she trying to be a badass? Because she kind of cries after.
I think it has to do with her backstory, honestly, and I'm sure we'll get some of that next year. Yeah. But
anyway, she shoots him to death.
Well, it's great because he starts to get up and talk like he's going to convince her not to or whatever, but no, she shoots him, which is really cool after a whole season we've been talking about the morality of killing someone who's doing bad things. Right. Not without a second thought. She shoots this guy no, he's bad, he's dead.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're supposed to like her still.
I don't know.
And because Wesley is a very, very likable bad guy.
Yeah.
He's not really evil, he's just kind of doing things as a means to an end. He's following Fisk around, he respects Fisk. I think they have kind of a love for each other as friends. And he dies for it, and I think that's interesting.
And that's how the episode ends.
Yeah.
So, I guess we're going to see what happens in the last 2 episodes next time. It's shaping up to be really, really good. We've obviously seen it already, but watching it over a second time for this, it still holds up. It's still a great show, and it makes me super excited for a couple months from now when Jessica Jones comes on. Hopefully, I don't know who's writing it. I don't know if any of the people who were involved in Daredevil at all are involved in Jessica Jones, but if it's even half as good as Daredevil, it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
And if they can pull off another really good one, if this is as good, if not better than Daredevil, goddamn, they got a good thing going with the whole Netflix deal.
Tennant's in it, and
he's really good.
Everything he's in has been fantastic, I think so.
A little biased because of Doctor Who, but I
watch all other stuff that he's done.
Broadchurch
is really, his performance is really good in most things I've ever seen him in, so.
Yeah, he's a really good actor. Anyway. So thanks, everyone. Stay tuned. We're almost done with this series, and then we'll probably... I don't know what we're going to do next.
Well, we got some Doctor Who coming up in a month.
Yeah.
And also, we're going to probably do Jessica Jones when that comes out. That's a while from now.
The one show I kind of want to do, I showed you one episode, that Black Mirror show, that sci-fi British show.
Maybe I'll touch on that a little bit.
Their Netflix might actually be picking that up.
Maybe some Sherlock or something?
Maybe.
That could be fun.
So, thanks everyone. Until next time, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
Unpopular Culture.
With Daredevil.